Attention all passengers, we are now arriving at the Great Alps. I repeat, we are now arriving at the Great Alps. Please get all your luggage ready for when we are ready to depart. Thank you. Alright, all funny intros aside, this is the Peaks of Yore Great Alps DLC that released on November 14th, 2024, and it is most definitely my new favorite DLC in almost any game I've ever played, as this is literally just another game, but in a DLC, as it has 23 new peaks, brand new hold types, brand new obstacles, brand new collectibles, a brand new ending, and it has so many new things that are currently in it and things that are going to be coming after this DLC. And yeah, this DLC is just absolutely amazing, but before I go into any of the actual gameplay revolving the DLC, I quickly just want to go over the hype regarding this DLC, as the DLC hype for this was absolutely insane, and just all the things that were shared about the DLC at the time, it was absolutely insane. So back when the game first released, there wasn't really that much talk about a DLC coming, mostly because, you know, the game was still brand new, so people didn't actually know if there was going to be a DLC coming. It wasn't until the game started getting more traction on YouTube and people started posting more videos about it. Like, I remember, you know, Ashel Swift posting his first video on it that, like, got insane traction. I remember seeing Pyrocynical play it, I remember seeing the Game Grumps play it, and I remember seeing all the reviews and stuff people made about the game. And it wasn't until by that point when there was officially an announcement saying that the DLC was getting made. And on top of that, the dev was also posting like little teasers and little screenshots and like GIFs and stuff, basically to show us like the scenery, the different types of holds, and like different gameplay, as well as some of the different obstacles like the goats and stuff like that. And there was just so much hype around this. It was insane. And on top of that, it was also just more hype because we didn't know a release date. We didn't know when we were gonna even get a trailer. We didn't know if we were gonna get a trailer. We didn't know if it was gonna be a free DLC or if it was gonna be a paid DLC. We didn't know any of this stuff around the time. And during that time as well was when I started actually making Peaks of Yore videos, was when I made my first game review and stuff like that. It was all during that time when the DLC was officially announced, and we were just sitting there waiting and just waiting for new announcements. So every time a new teaser was posted in like the Discord server and stuff, it was pretty hyped up because people were like, this is completely different from what we've seen. It wasn't until the 1-year anniversary of Peaks of Yore where the dev actually posted an official trailer for it with an official release date for it. And that day was absolutely insane for Peaks of Yore players, including myself. Just like seeing everything that he's been working on for the past like year, or seeing everything he's been working on for the past couple months with this DLC, and actually seeing it in its entirety almost in the trailer, and then seeing that it was only going to come out 2 weeks after that trailer was absolutely insane. And I knew for a fact I wanted to stream this DLC, which is exactly what I did. I streamed pretty much every day of me playing the DLC until I completed it, and even after those streams, I was still going back into it and getting all the collectibles, learning about the new peaks more. I started speedrunning some of the new peaks. It's been very, very fun. And after playing for so long with this DLC, I can now officially say that yeah, no, this DLC is really fucking good. So like I said in the intro, there are 23 brand new peaks in this DLC. So what I figured I would do, kind of just to sum up the DLCs, but also, you know, at least talk about some of the peaks, is I wanted to talk about all 3 books and pretty much just talk about some of my favorite peaks in all of those books, because some of those peaks have some really good peaks and some of them have some very scary ones. So to start off, similar to the base game, you get 3 books that all increase in difficulty and change mechanics. So starting with book 1, since that's the one you start with, it's pretty much kind of the way of the dev getting you back into the basics of Peaks of Yore, while also trying to keep you figuring out how to do more of the advanced stuff. My 3 favorite peaks from here by far had to be the Castle of Swan King, mostly because you're climbing a fucking castle, but also it's really nice, it's really intricate. The collectibles on this one were really cool because most of the collectibles involved you having to jump away from the castle and swing off of trees to get to new parts of the castle to get collectibles. This was also the first peak of the DLC I actually decided to speedrun, and I was actually world record holder for like 2 days, I think, before somebody took my record. And nowadays the world record on it is like 30 seconds or something, so I'm like, yeah, there's no hope for me there. But yeah, the castle was definitely my favorite, one of my favorites in the first book. And then my second favorite in the first book was Seaside Tribune, which is literally right after the Castle of Swan King. That one I also really enjoyed, mostly because it felt like I was on like an obstacle course, like I was in like an episode of Wipeout or something. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. That's a very old TV show, by the way. But yeah, it just felt like you were on an obstacle course. You were just grabbing onto walls, grabbing onto wheels, grabbing onto just little branch, like sticks of wood sticking out of the ground. And it was just very fun, and I had a lot of fun with that one. I know that level has been changed a little bit since its first release, but I will be getting into that later. But yeah, that was definitely my second favorite in this DLC. And then my third favorite in the DLC was I think it's pronounced the Great Bok Tree, the Great Bok Tree. Don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's literally just climbing up a big ass tree. And that might not seem like much, but climbing up a big ass tree is funny. So it definitely felt like with this first book, the dev wanted to do a lot more kind of just goofier climbs and a lot more like just a lot more fun things, like, you know, being able to climb on top of a castle, having an obstacle course, climbing up a big ass tree. And yeah, in the Great Bok Tree, you also swing off of vines to other trees, and you just go from tree to tree until you get to the very top. It's very fun. I do enjoy it, and I had a lot of fun doing that. Those 3 peaks. Not to say all the other peaks in the books are bad. Those are the peaks in all of the books are definitely really good, but for book 1, those 3 are specifically the 3 I enjoyed the most. Mostly because they kind of brought out just the inner like silliness, like, you know, the base game was trying to be a bit more of a realistic climbing game. The DLC, at least from this first book, pretty much tried to show itself as like, yeah, we're being a little bit more silly in this DLC this time around, and I just enjoyed it a lot. It was very, very funny. Now with book 2 was definitely the shortest book, having only about like 5 or 6 climbs in it. But each peak actually, those were definitely the most unique ones in the entire, in the DLC. Those were definitely the most unique compared to the first book. And I only had 2 real ones that I enjoyed the most here. The first one being the All Matter Dam, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is literally you're climbing up a dam, and there's a lot of construction building and a lot of scaffolding and stuff on it, and you're pretty much just climbing on that. And one nice thing that the dev decided to do this time around for this DLC is he decided to make some of these peaks actually limit you with some of your tools. Like some of the peaks, for example, the All Matter Dam, will let you place ropes, but it only lets you place ropes on the scaffolding specifically. You can't place ropes anywhere. It has to be specifically on the wood scaffolding. And he did this in a way that actually makes sense in the game's lore, where he said there's a sign that says like to prevent damage to the dam or whatever, which makes sense. But it's literally just the dev trying to promote like people just taking more risks and actually just like doing more crazy things. And I really like that. I like when devs try to encourage people to not play by the game's rules and actually go a little bit more crazy and, you know, just have more fun with it. I do enjoy stuff like that. But overall, the dam was definitely a really good climb. I definitely had a lot of fun with that one. Just jumping from scaffolding to scaffolding, and just, you know, they have the bricks, which have some bricks that can fall. Some of them are like slimy bricks, so your hands slowly slide down them, similar to like the sliding rocks that you can see in the base game. But that one was also pretty fun. And then there was Dunderhorn, which was definitely also one of my favorite ones, since that was the one that introduced the goats. And a lot of people actually made comparisons to Eldenhorn from the base game with this one, which, I mean, they're the same name, so they're kind of the same mountain. But yeah, no, honestly, Dunderhorn was honestly pretty fun. I enjoyed just the long and treacherous climb on that peak. The goats are honestly a really funny mechanic. I wish they were implemented in the same way that the birds were implemented, but I understand that they aren't really as, like, you can't really put them in every situation like the birds can be. But they were still really fun because, you know, the goats, they jump around from rock to rock, specifically the rocks that you grab on, meaning that they can jump to a rock that you're holding and knock you off, or if you're trying to grab one that they're already on, you just can't even grab it, meaning that you have to kind of just work your way around them, but you also got to pay attention to their patterns of where they jump. And it's just really funny, and it's just really cool overall because I enjoyed just having to learn the patterns while also trying to just kind of throw myself around and just jump around the peak trying to get to the top. I enjoyed it. Those two I definitely did enjoy. But yeah, like I said, all the peaks in the second book are also really fun. They're definitely a lot more difficult compared to book one, which is really funny because one of the characters, I believe his name was Oswald, who he's like the guy that you speak to for most of the DLC, since he's kind of like just teaching you. He definitely said that like the books definitely ramp up in difficulty very quickly as you keep playing, and he could not be further from the truth. He was absolutely correct. The peaks do get a lot more difficult as time progresses, and that's leading up into book 3, which book 3 is mainly centered around the ice stages, which is actually really nice because I think it was kind of weird that the first 3 books in the base game were all based on normal mountains, but then they had like one book specifically for 2 ice mountains in the base game. So it's nice that like snowy and ice mountains are getting their own book this time around, since we already had book 1 have a good handful of mountains that were all like just really goofy, and then book 2 was mainly based around more intricate and more difficult climbs, but there was only like 5 of them in that book. So book 3 is centered around basically just a good handful of ice related mountains. And book 3, my 2 favorites from that one were Towering Visor, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Towering Vizier or Visor. That one was supposed to be my favorite because the difficulty rating on it was extremely preposterous, and I've never seen a mountain be ranked like that in this game. And I just thought that name sounded funny, so I was like, yeah, of course. Like it was just one of my favorites for the name alone, but also it's honestly just a really fun climb. You kind of start off with just basic climbing for most of it, and you know, you do like the new hold types and whatnot, but as you get higher and higher, it becomes more windy, and you start seeing snow and ice. So it's like you start off with basic climbing, but as you get higher, you slowly have to start using your pickaxes for everything. And it kind of just felt nice, and it actually made sense, since, you know, like it's gonna be colder the higher you go up. So like, yeah, of course you're gonna have to start using your ice pickaxes and stuff. It was just very fun overall, and I did have a lot of fun with it, and I just enjoy the goofy ass difficulty rating of it. So yeah, that was definitely one of my favorites. And then my second favorite for book 3 was Euler's Chasm, and that one was honestly one of my favorites in this entire DLC by far, simply for the fact that not only was it like an ice peak, but it was a underground cavern that you have to climb around. That is one of the coolest fucking things I think I've ever seen in this game. I loved this one. I didn't even care how difficult it was. I didn't even care about some of the issues I had. I was just having fun because I was in an underground cavern, climbing on ice, going from all the way underground all the way back up to the top. Because when you first start in the peak, you can see the exit, but you have to go underground and go all the way around to it. It's like it's so cool, and I'm so like glad that the dev decided to not just stick to normal like peaks and normal mountains. I'm glad that he's actually like doing more unique things this time around, and he was actually doing things that like are like the complete opposite, where instead of going up, you're going underground. Like it was really cool, and I honestly had a lot of fun with it. And yeah, just all 3 of these books definitely had their worth. There wasn't really any peaks in these books that felt like that they were the same to ones in the base game or anything like that. And keep in mind, a lot of these books have collectibles on them too, so you're going to be going through and getting all the collectibles, which we will talk about later. But yeah, overall, these 3 books were actually really fun. So even though I did already mention my favorite peaks in the third book, I felt like it wouldn't be right if I didn't talk about the last two peaks in that book, since they are the last peaks of the DLC. And those two are Eldritch Wall and Mount Morgorn. And Eldritch Wall is the first one up, and I am officially going to be giving this the label of Solemn Tempest 2, because it is literally just... It is very difficult. It is a lot, one of the more difficult peaks that you will encounter in this DLC, but it is significantly shorter than Tempest. It is just, it's a pretty short peak. It's only like, I believe it's like close to like 1,500 meters or so, but it is very difficult. Like if you hated the horizontal sections in Solemn Tempest, you are gonna just absolutely despise the horizontal sections in Eldritch Wall, because it's not that they're bad, it's just you're dealing with them constantly, and you're also dealing with horizontal sections with the new hold types, and it's very difficult, but it's still very fun, and you do get done with it kind of quickly. But yeah, it's overall a pretty good mountain. It's really difficult, but it is pretty short. But yeah, I kind of just like calling it Solemn Tempest 2, because that's kind of what it is. It's just a smaller, but still like kind of compressed, more difficult version of Solemn Tempest. And then Mount Morgorn is the final peak in the DLC. And this peak is, I felt like honestly, it was kind of a bit of a pushover, if that makes sense. Like it was just weird going from Eldritch Wall, dealing with this insanely difficult peak, and having all these horizontal sections and all that type of stuff. And Mount Morgorn, like, it was still pretty difficult, but like you were mostly going straight up in it, and it wasn't nearly as difficult, in my opinion.
Please, thank you. Thank you. Oh, Jesus, that's in? That's in. 2,000 meters. Okay. No.
There were still some pretty difficult sections, and I did fall a few times on that peak from being really high up. So I'm not gonna say like it was like super easy or anything like that, but it didn't feel right with how easy it was compared to the first, or compared to Eldritch Wall. But it was still pretty fun overall. I did enjoy it. And after you complete all of it, you do get a brand new ending where once again the character's face does not get shown. At this point, I've pretty much just given up on seeing his face, even though people have already seen it, because people have been able to go into game files and do stuff like that. It's whatever. But yeah, overall though, all the peaks of the DLC are honestly really fun, and I really enjoyed them. And yeah, it's really, really fun. But one thing, alright, so, and the next thing I want to get into, actually, revolving the peaks, is all the new hold types, because I've been talking about them this whole time, all the new hold types, and I know you're probably wondering what kind of hold types are there, so yeah, let's just quickly get into that. So like I was saying, there are brand new types of holds in this DLC, and there's not a whole bunch, but there's still enough to actually change up the gameplay a decent amount. So one of the first new hold types that you'll deal with are pinches, and pinches are kind of just really tiny rocks that you can only grab with one hand. And with the main thing about them being that if you hold them with one hand, the timer for them is practically instant. It's like less than a second almost. But if you grab two of them with two hands, the timer actually pauses, but you still have a meter on your grip that you have to deal with. So you basically have to treat these like you have to go as quick as possible, but always make sure that you are grabbing two of them. And you can use chalk to slow down the timer a little bit, but you still have to be pretty quick about it. So these ones are basically, you have to grab them with two hands, but you still gotta be wary of your grip meter and actually do it pretty quickly still. And yeah, those ones are honestly pretty good. They're pretty difficult. Like I remember on Eldritch Wall, there's like some sections where you have to go horizontal while dealing with those, which is hell to say the least. It was horrible and it was very difficult, but I still had a pretty good time with it. So the next type of hold that I want to get into are volumes, and volumes are by far my favorite type of hold in this DLC, as they are rocks that you cannot grab from above. You can only grab them from below, and their entire gameplay mechanic is you're trying to grab them and swing with momentum and keep your momentum constantly going while grabbing them. So pretty much you grab one, you swing up, and while you still have that momentum, you grab another one and keep swinging yourself up and just keeping that momentum going, because the moment you run out of momentum is when you start slipping and you start falling. Now, unfortunately, these volumes were nerfed into the ground after the DLC first released, but once again, I will be talking about that stuff in a little bit. But yeah, so but volumes are, even now, they are still pretty fun. They're still pretty good to use, and I do enjoy them, but they aren't the same as they were originally. Then the next type of hold is the cracks, and cracks are pretty interesting. They're definitely one of the more unique ones that we've seen, as they aren't really a rock. They are more just a piece in the mountain that is literally just a crack. And sometimes, if you're not paying attention, there could be a crack just right in front of you that you have to grab that you might not even see. At least for me, that's what happened. There were some situations where there were cracks to grab onto that I just didn't see because they blended in that well. But yeah, the cracks are pretty much just these long sections where you have to grab on in between a crack of a mountain. But the thing is that you don't want to be moving so much to lose your balance on them, as you do have a meter, and depending on how much you move, the meter does increase, and if you swing and move around too much, you will slip out of them. So you do have to treat them a little bit slower. But on most peaks that have cracks, you can also just cramp and jump off of them, meaning that you could just grab them, cramp and jump upwards, and not really have to deal with them. It's not that big of a deal. They are still pretty fun, and I do enjoy them, and I do enjoy the sections of like being hanging over like an overpass and having to slowly make your way through a crack. It's pretty fun, and I do enjoy it a lot. And not only that, but with cracks, they actually have another version of them where they're actually even tighter, meaning that the most that you can move around is a lot more sensitive, meaning it'll be a lot easier for you to slip out of them and fall. And volumes actually have a similar thing where they have smaller versions of volumes that you can only grab with one hand, that you just got to be super quick on, or you are just going to fall. And that's about most of the holds. They are, like I said, there's not a bunch of new holds, but they are all pretty fun, and they do add a lot of gameplay to them. And the gameplay also just gets completely insane once we start talking about the new collectibles in the game, being the idols. Alright, so like I already said, there are brand new types of collectibles in the DLC, and these collectibles are the idols. Now, the idols are collectibles you can find throughout the entirety of the DLC. Some of the peaks have collectibles, some of them don't. You kind of have to just look at the map or look at your barometer on each peak to see if there is a collectible. But basically, the idols are these little statues that you have to find two halves for, by the way. Like, one half will be in one peak and one half will be in the other peak. You just have to kind of look for them. And each idol, once you find both halves and you clean them off and set them up, once you actually combine them, they are a statue that you can activate to actually have an effect in game. And a lot of these idols do things like they change the types of holds, like they change like normal holds into like crimps, or they change them into ice, or they change them into slopers, which is I just found out is the name for the sliding rocks. And yeah, there's a lot of those types, and there's also types of idols like the idol of sundown, which just makes the game basically nighttime all the time, which is really cool because all these idols work in the base game, meaning you can do stuff like play Solemn Tempest in the dark and change the hold types on Solemn Tempest. It's very cool. I like it a lot. And then there's like the idol of cruelty, which just basically makes the game harder and makes it so you are basically pulled down a lot more and you have like a lot more weight to your character, so like you can't jump as high with crampons. And yeah, it basically just makes the game harder, which is why it's called the idol of cruelty. But yeah, so all these idols are scattered throughout the DLC. You kind of just have to find them. And at the time of me recording this, the dev actually added a new type of collectible that you can get, being the pins. And the way you get pins is finding even more collectibles that were added throughout the DLC. Finding things like flowers, or finding like ghosts, like I think they're called ghastly goats, which they are just like goats that only appear during the dark because they're ghosts. And there's also stuff like beating all the mountains in the DLC plus Solemn Tempest with like the Idol of Cruelty and the Idol of Sundown, or beating the entire DLC with the Idol of Sundown. and pretty much all of this stuff gets you these pins that you can put on your character's arms, and you can just see them in game. And yeah, it's kind of just an extra little reward for people that really like going for collectibles and stuff. It's all very fun, and going for collectibles just adds more to the gameplay of this DLC, since all these peaks are so unique and so like just different from the base game, that you also have to just keep in mind that you got to really use observation to try and find these collectibles while you're trying to beat these peaks. Now, the last thing I want to get into before I kind of give my closing thoughts about this DLC is mainly all the changes it went through when it first came out. This DLC had kind of a messy start because the dev was throwing out patches left, right, and center. Like, he was throwing out a patch like every like 5 minutes. It felt. There were moments when I was streaming this DLC and people were like, yo, there was a new patch that came out, what are your thoughts on it? I was like, there was a new patch that came out? They were like, yeah, it came out today. And I would be in the middle of streaming the game and a new patch would come out. And it was mostly like just stuff like balancing. They would nerf rocks. They nerfed the 6-point crampons, so that way you actually felt the difference between them and the 10 points. They would nerf some of the new holds, like the volumes and the cracks and stuff like that. He would, like I said earlier, he changed the way some of the peaks were designed, like Seaside Tribune. He would change the way some of those peaks were, and then people wouldn't like them, so he would revert them, and then he would change them again, and then he would change all of these different types of holds again, and he would just he changed a lot of this DLC during its first like a week of being out. And I don't blame him though, because he's just trying to make sure that the game is fun and fair and just balanced for everybody. He's trying to make sure that everybody has an enjoyable experience on this DLC, and I totally get it. It was just really crazy. It was just a really crazy time how so many people were playing this DLC, and the dev was throwing out bug fix after bug fix after patch after patch. Like, he was just throwing things out like every day for like a week. There was just like 2 or 3 brand new patches that were coming out basically. But I don't blame him, because he's trying to make a fun experience for everybody, and I totally respect that. But yeah, I quickly just wanted to say that, because yeah, just like it was hard for me making this video to talk about certain things, since there were so many things that got changed from when I originally played the DLC, that I had to replay those things just to be able to have a new opinion on them, since I didn't know how much they changed. And yeah, it was kind of a crazy time for Peaks of Yore, specifically with the DLC, but I feel like in its current state, I feel like it's definitely in one of the better states that it's in, and it's definitely in a more accessible state where anybody can get this DLC and load into it, and it's overall just a very fun DLC still, even after all the changes and after all the nerfs and after everything. It's still a pretty good DLC. Alright, so now it is time for my closing thoughts on the Peaks of Yore Great Alps DLC. So, would I recommend people pick up this DLC? Well, if you're already in Peaks of Yore and you're already really enjoying the game, and you feel like you just want to learn more about the game, get better at it, and just do a lot more advanced stuff, but also just have more fun and have basically a whole nother game to play, yes, I would absolutely recommend people pick up this DLC, because it is quite literally just another DLC it's pretty much just a brand new game for Peaks of Yore, and it's just a lot more fun. Like, it's more of the goofy and silly aspect of Peaks rather than kind of the more serious like mountain climbing simulator that the game was trying to be. The DLC definitely just brings more of that like silliness and just makes it's just a lot more fun, and it is a bit difficult, so you know, you do have to at least play the base game to understand how some mechanics work, but it's still very fun, and I do still recommend anybody that likes Peaks of Yore to get into this DLC. It is a little bit pricey, similar to the base game, because the base game's close to $20. This DLC is about $13 on Steam base price. When the DLC first came out, actually, it was on sale for $11, kind of just as like a day one sale kind of thing. And yeah, with normal sales going on, I would still recommend people pick up this game, or even just pick up Peaks of Yore if you still haven't tried it yet, because I still think Peaks of Yore is an amazing game, and I think this DLC just really enhances the game and just adds more, and it just made it so much more fun. And yeah, it literally just made this amazing climbing game even more amazing than it already was. And I don't think I've seen games do stuff like that a lot, where they make a DLC that's basically just the same game but even better than it was before. And yeah, I really enjoyed the Peaks of Yore Great Alps DLC. I enjoyed streaming it. I enjoyed streaming it every day until I finished it. I enjoyed getting all the collectibles. I enjoyed hanging out in the community and talking about the DLC with people. It was just a very fun time, and I still enjoy this game to this day. I still love playing it. I still love speedrunning it. I still love going and finding collectibles. I love everything about this game. And the community just makes it that much better because it's so easy to just go into the community and talk about things. And yeah, for this being like a single dev game, and he was able to get so much support, he made a whole DLC, which is a whole new game. Freaking Andos is insane. He's insane for making this DLC. I'm so happy that he made this DLC because it just made the game so much better. And I'm so glad that he made it, and I'm so happy that I was able to play it when it first came out. And yeah, I would easily recommend anybody pick up this DLC. Or if you haven't even gotten into Peaks of Yore and you're watching this for the first time, I recommend just looking into Peaks of Yore or checking out my other video I've made on my videos I've made on Peaks of Yore, because it's just a very fun game and the dev is still adding things to it. At this point, we don't know what else he's gonna do with this game, to be fair, but yeah, it's still just a very fun game and I enjoy it very much. And I'm so glad I was able to get into this game when I did. And yeah, that's basically just my final verdict is, if you like Peaks of Yore and you just want more Peaks of Yore, this DLC is perfect. It makes the best climbing game I've ever played even better than it already was.